Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the public question and answer session for Team Hong Kong 2016. My name is Chris Reed. I'm the Executive Director for CTI Music Ministries, and you see before you the recently returned heroes of our Hong Kong 2016 team. We'll get introductions from them as we go along, but these guys have spent the last few hours today with us kind of recounting what the last 3 weeks and even back into training 4 and 6 weeks have been like for them, what they've experienced, what God has done in and through them, and now is our opportunity for them to share that with you, the local community that mobilized them, friends and family and supporters who have been part of that, and we even have the live stream going so that people who are not able to join us here in person can also participate in that. And a special welcome to those of you who are joining us remotely. If you do have questions, this is going to be a time for you to ask questions of the team, to hear what you want to hear out of them, and I may draw a few things out of them as we go. But if you have questions and you're on the live stream, if you are viewing from ctimusic.org/live, there's a chat box on the right-hand side, and you can add your questions there, and someone from our local community here will make sure that those get represented so that we can ask them to the team. So as we get started here, I am going to introduce to you the team's leaders. This is David Albers and Roxy Huber. And just to get us started, I'm going to ask, can we get that mic down here to David?
Already done.
That mic, to David. This David right here. It's almost like they knew this was coming. I'm going to ask David to give us an introduction to the partner they were working with and kind of what that partner's intention is in hosting a CTI team and what they hope to come out of the relationship.
Well, hello everyone. I'm David. I know most of you all that are here, and probably not most of you that are on the camera. So we were in Hong Kong. We were partnering with Youth for Christ. They housed us, fed us, took care of us, told us where to go, when to be there. The whole time we were in Hong Kong for the 3 weeks, we did all kinds of different things to help serve them, which was our primary focus in serving them and helping them with their ministry there in Hong Kong to reach the people of Hong Kong. So we did that through concerts on the street evangelism, by playing concerts, sometimes full band, sometimes acoustic, sometimes a cappella. Sometimes we would pass out food, or borderline start craziness by tossing gifts into the air and watching people run around trying to catch them. And just doing whatever we could to get people connected to YFC there in Hong Kong, to grab people's attention and redirect it to God, and by sharing the gospel with them, this good news of God's grace. So not only did we do the street concerts, we did meetings at the YFC building that they do multiple times per week. We went to an amusement park. We went to quite a few different schools. Let's see, what are some of the other venues we played at, guys?
Star Ferry.
Yep, Star Ferry, so another outdoor concert.
Filipino churches.
And yes, we did gospel dinners, which seems like a normal thing to CTI people, what that is. But basically, the YFC gathers a bunch of people at a restaurant for dinner and provides dinner and has as much gospel presented to those people in that amount of time as possible. They do that through bringing people from the crowd to share their talents. We did some sets, we shared testimonies, and just give messages, have a good time, give people gifts, share a meal together, and just celebrate the gospel and tell others about the love that Jesus has for us. So those are quite a few of the things we did while we were there. We were very busy. I don't have an exact concert total. Because
All of the concerts.
Yeah, all of the concerts.
All of the concerts.
2, 3, 4, 5 a day. So I think it was somewhere around 50 concerts. We did 74 sets at those concerts. And it was just a great experience to be in such a fast-paced environment, presenting the gospel to as many people as possible, and to be able to serve the YFC staff in every way we could.
I feel like we have to allow an interruption here because a very large fan club has entered the room, and I don't know who they're associated with. Welcome. So we're just giving an overview of the partnership and what we're doing. It's always nice to have people come to these things. So we'll always tolerate that kind of an interruption. So one of our primary audience demographics here in the room is Team Singapore. Team Singapore, why don't you guys stand up? All right, you can have a seat. So the people who just stood up are currently in training to go out and do something similar to what Team Hong Kong has just returned from, but I want to highlight as we get this started that we have a variety of partnerships with CTI. Both in these cases, the Team Singapore is going to be working with Youth for Christ in Singapore. Team Hong Kong just came back from working with Youth for Christ in Hong Kong. But I can't envision two CTI partners who are as divergent in their approach to what it means to share the gospel in their country. Singapore is extremely intentional with us in advance in helping define our program, and they craft every programmatic environment specific for the audience. And so you mentioned your concert count, and I want to make sure these guys know that's probably not going to be your story because of the difference in the way our partners approach things here. Hong Kong, do you guys think it's fair to say or characterize it as it's almost a little more like guerrilla warfare, where the goal, well, I should have you guys tell us about the goal. My interpretation is it's just mass gospel exposure, that's really what they're after. In fact, is there anything that your partners have told you about what their mission is that you could pass on that help us understand it? Go for it.
Oh, do I have to do it? Yeah. So David Shu, leader of YFC, has this catchphrase that he tells us like every single day of our lives that we're there, repeatedly. And he says, you have to be ready to preach, pray, sing, or die at a moment's notice for the gospel. And I had heard it a couple times here, and then we got there, and I realized what that actually meant, because literally every second of the day is like, you ready for this? Throw a gospel out. Throw another gospel out. Let's go. So it was very high energy all the time, every second of the day.
Yeah, he has a number of phrases like that. Another one is, we either win their hearts today or they break our hearts tomorrow, meaning another soul is lost. So this program is very passionate about mass gospel exposure. One ground rule I forgot to mention is if you get the mic, the two things you need to say at least the first time is your name and what your role was on the team. So,
my name is Kira Rook, and I was one of the singers on the team.
And you still are, because you guys have another concert. Great, well, I'm going to open it up to the floor and ask if there are questions here. If you guys would like to hear these people respond, and you can ask for somebody specific or just pose it to the team in general, and we'll see who wants to respond, and that includes people on the live stream. There's a question right here, Matt.
Hong Kong McDonald's or USA McDonald's?
Matt's question is one for the ages. He says, Hong Kong McDonald's or USA McDonald's? All right, down you go.
Okay, so my name is Brett Parson, and I am our bassist. I'm inclined to say neither, because I hate McDonald's. But if I had to choose, I would go with Hong Kong, much better than American.
We've had some amens in the house. Apparently there's strong resounding with them. Any other comments on the McDonald's question?
Sure. Hong Kong or USA? Yeah, neither. I pretty much have my life quota of McDonald's.
Excellent. That's words to live by right there. Thanks for starting us out, Matt. Who else? I saw some other hands over here with a question. Chris.
Who smelled the worst?
Wait a minute. Okay. I have to repeat the questions for the live stream. Chris's deep probing question is who smelled the worst. He was careful to word it in the past tense so as not to invoke anyone right now, but team? Okay. Chris is going to self-identify.
Apparently I smelled the worst. This means I'm working the hardest.
So Chris brought up the word work. You worked the hardest. I have already told them that we're not going to talk about how hot and sweaty it was, so we're just going to disclose that everybody worked hard and worked up a sufficient lather. But would you guys like to tell us what kind of activities you engaged in that maybe weren't musical as far as serving and working?
My name is Caitlin Hassman, and I was a keyboardist on Team Hong Kong. We did a lot of concerts, but we also handed out a lot of food and gifts to people.
So handing out food. And some backstory on how is that part of YFC's ministry, if you know? Or if anybody else knows.
So basically, it's a way to get a crowd gathered, and so when we start handing out food, then people are like, oh, food, and then a bunch more people will come and they'll be like, give me food, and so then people will stick around, and then along with food, we'd throw out little trinkets. They're almost like McDonald's Happy Meal toys, except not. So we'd throw them into the air, and we actually got stopped by the police because we were
Bread from me. So
It's cool how the ministry isn't just external, but you have a reaction to it yourself as well. Other questions? Timmy.
What's your favorite experience?
Timmy has asked, Timmy from Sing Team
As
Award.
a team or individual?
Favorite experience, team or individual? We'll broaden and say a favorite experience so you don't have to labor on. Is this actually the favorite?
So individually, my name is Melissa and I'm a vocalist. We went to this really beautiful venue, which was both a church and a Christian school. And it's one of our favorite venues because the primary school was really responsive. The kids were participating in every song, joining in on all the hand motions, and specifically on Oisie, which is the song I sing. All the kids knew it and were singing along to it. And it was just this joyous little kids choir. So it was a really memorable experience for me. Any others?
So there was a location that we played at called Star Ferry, and it was just a street venue. But across from where we played and across the big walkway, there's this really great big bay with large boats and a cruise liner. Yeah, cruise liner. That's what it's called. And at night it got foggy, but it was just enough to where you could still see everything, and it was picturesque. It was really beautiful.
Chris suggests that Katja has something to share. Any other favorite experiences or just memorable experiences you'd like to share?
Okay, well, we there's a bakery right underneath the YFC building, and it's just down and then a few over, and we the bakery guy that we always went to, his name was Sam, and so Sam knew my order by the end of the time. He was always he'd bake it up for me and have it ready for me, and he ended up giving us deals at the end because we were there all the time. But yeah, so we all loved the bakery.
And so, what was your order?
It was their version of a cupcake, and it was just this amazing thing. It just melted in your mouth. It was great. And then a sugar coated donut, but it was super dense and moist. It was great. It's great.
I think there are a lot of people in the room who can identify with the awesomeness that is Hong Kong Bakery.
So, as stated, my name's Roxy. Not only was I one of the leaders, I was also team sound tech as well. But one of my favorite moments, I also went to Hong Kong in the fall, so this is probably my favorite moment from both trips, was we were having dinner for the first night with David Chu, and he was teaching us a lot, and then he's like, hey, I want you guys to become independent and get your way back to the YFC by yourself. So, I want to show you a few different ways. And so he did throughout the night. He showed us how to use the MTR, which is the subway system. And so he took us on this nice long walk then. And he just kept going, and we're we don't know even where we're going or where we are. And then we got into this mall, of all places, and he's still trying to show us how to get back to the YFC. And he keeps going. We don't know where he's going. It seems like he doesn't even know where he's going. Which it was just okay, let's just keep going. We're just going to trust this guy. And so we get into a parking garage then, and we're oh boy, what's up next? So he takes us to the top of the parking garage, and then he gets to see the skyline of Hong Kong, right from the top of the parking garage. And it was just a beautiful moment. I almost cried. I don't cry a lot. I have feelings a lot. I don't cry though. I almost cried. It was that beautiful of a moment. That was one of my favorite moments, not only because of the beauty of everything, but it also was a lesson to learn to trust even when you can't understand what's going on in that moment.
Very cool.
Can I just add that on that walk, there was a whole thing of like flamingos. Like in the middle of the city, there was just a giant cage of flamingos, and I like never get to see flamingos. So I was so happy. Like that was a high for me.
So you're not talking about the little plastic yard
No,
statues?
like real flamingos. They were so cute.
Corey had something down here.
I didn't mention this to the team, but I don't know if they remember, before we left, I had a dream, and a dream that Jesus was in, and it was the first time I ever had seen Jesus in any of my dreams. And he was we were in a church, and there was a lot of women with their heads covered and wearing white, like you see most Muslim women wearing at a service, and the minister said, queens of the King Jesus Christ, and the whole church just broke out into like a shout. And then it went to the next scene where this is when I seen Jesus. He was in a boat, and the waves were crashing, and the guy was still preaching. I can still hear him in the overtone. He says, the same God who spoke to the winds and made it to be peace. And then I seen Jesus sitting in a boat, just sitting there. And then it went to the next scene, and there was two white horses in a carriage, and they were kind of spooked, and I was the one like saying, whoa, 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 whoa. And so I told this dream to some of the people that after the day, because we were going through our training, and the next day I told the dream. But when we were there in Hong Kong, one Sunday we were leaving from a church going to another church, and I just seen, women with bright clothes on, with bright scarves on. We were proceeding to a second church, and there was just Muslim women with bright clothes with their heads wrapped the whole time. I don't know if y'all remember that Sunday or not. And I looked at one lady, and I just kind of nodded my head, and I don't know why I did that, but then I was dawning on it, later that day, and I was like, this compared to the dream that I had. So that was one of the most heartfelt moments, memorable moments that I will remember.
You guys mentioned David Chu, who's the director of YFC there, and right when you guys got to the country, you were part of a special event, and I wonder if you'd like to tell us a little bit about that.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh, the wedding.
Okay, so much has happened. We apparently forgot.
We actually have a story of a team that didn't know where they were going. They ended up playing at a prom in there. It wasn't this team, but CT. What's the most interesting thing you discovered about Hong Kong people and their culture?
Most interesting thing that I discovered, that they are so willing to converse or to stop and listen and hear it. So
imagine doing this kind of ministry that you guys just did, particularly the street ministry. Imagine doing it in the U.S. And okay, so already you're like, there's a big difference. So that kind of highlights a difference in the cultures. Who wants to maybe put some words to, this is what's different about the culture in Hong Kong as far as street ministry and their interest in that goes from what we'd expect in the U.S.?
Okay, apparently we need volunteers to do this. I think one of the main reasons why we had the same reaction is like, in Hong Kong, they're very accepting of the message we give. They may not believe, they may not accept it, but they'll be like, okay, let's just sit and listen, and I'll give you a bit of my time, and I'll humor you a little bit, even if it's not them humoring us. But if you were to do that in the U.S., they'd be like, why are you shoving this down my throat? It'd also be like, I'm not even going to give you the time of day because I'm too busy going somewhere else. Whereas like one of the most interesting for me to see in Hong Kong is that they're probably the hardest working people I've ever met, because they are so determined to get money and things to just even survive. Whereas like we have all this excess and we have all these basic things beyond measure, and we're still just like not even. So we're like physically and economically rich in our own ways, but at the same time we're spiritually and community poor at the same time. So I think those are like drastic differences on why the reaction happened.
And I think that gives you a little bit of an insight into maybe some of the mechanisms, the ministry mechanisms that you guys were talking about, throwing trinkets out and even just playing the music. And you did a lot of ministry with gospel tracts, which we might have varying reactions to here in the States. But as Roxy just said, in Hong Kong, they're at least willing to give you an audience. They're willing to listen, to hear you out, which is very different than here in the U.S. One thing that we teach team members in training is that the measure of our success isn't any kind of a reaction we get. The measure of our success is were we faithful to the opportunity that was presented to us, that God gave to us. And so here in a culture where people are actually at least willing to hear what you have to say, to be bold and say, okay, I'm going to share the gospel with you, and then it's in your hands. You take it or you leave it as the Spirit prompts you. But that's not our responsibility, right? You wanted to add something, Chris? Yeah.
So I'm not saying this is like true for all Americans, but it's probably true for me. So while we were walking down the streets of like Lady Street or Star Ferry, there'd be people that would like walk up to you and just start talking to you in their native language, and then you'd say something in English, and they would understand you, but they'd like just keep talking and carry on like an entire conversation with you in Cantonese, and you just stand there like, I don't know what you're saying. So I had an entire conversation with someone, just me talking in English and her talking in Cantonese, and probably having like no like relativity in the conversation at all. But this happened a couple of times, so definitely just like having a conversation even if you don't understand what they're saying.
So the question that was on the table is, what's the most interesting thing that you discovered, or an interesting thing that you discovered about the people? If anybody else has any other responses to that.
The lack of toilet paper. Like, Roxy carried a roll of toilet paper around in her bag because, like, in bathrooms, especially this one McDonald's that we went to, there's, like, sometimes there's, like, toilet paper outside of the stalls, like, next to, like, the sinks and stuff, and then you have to, like, take it before you go in. And that toilet paper is also used as your paper towels. So, like, if you weren't prepared, like, you could be like, all right, no paper, like, no toilet paper. So, like, yeah, they don't, it's not like a thing like in the U.S. where, like, we went to the airport and we're like, oh my gosh, there's toilet paper in every stall. So, yeah, that was just very different.
It's the little things that you take for granted. Another question from here, yeah.
Okay, so what are some things you discovered about yourself as you
Deep question.
So the question, and we've talked about what you discover about the people. Let's turn it inward. What did you discover about yourself?
You got this, B-Funk.
Yeah, if you didn't hear him, he said B-Funk, so I will answer to literally anything. So one thing that I discovered about myself was that I didn't put nearly enough trust in God's strength this last few weeks. So like around like the third day we were there, I like just didn't have any energy, and I had to like break down praying to God, like, God, I need more energy for this or I'm not going to make it. And that was like a big thing for me, just being able to put more faith in God's strength rather than my own strength, because, man, Hong Kong really tests that.
One thing that I learned is that I'm really bad at time management. So in Hong Kong, you have a set schedule, and it can like change or be the same, or like something you just completely canceled out. So we literally were probably doing something 99% of most days where we were either just like walking Lady Street, or having a concert, or on a bus, or loading equipment, or anything like that. And it's kind of like opened my eyes like how bad I am at time management, because I'm like the world's worst procrastinator. I think that's definitely gonna be a thing that's changed about me when I get home, is I'm definitely gonna take time for less granted.
I'm sorry. I'm going to change that thing about procrastination when I get home.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I got a couple
days unite tomorrow.
Corey has a comment.
I learned that that in spite of what people think about me or how people see me, that I still could walk with the Lord in my heart, and walk with the Lord in wisdom and integrity and in honor for who He is to me and who I am in Him, and still strive for love and unity.
We spent an entire day talking about identity in Christ during training, because it is very, endemic that even as Christians, it's not the first place we go to know who we are, but our identity as sons and daughters of the King. You had something on that?
You totally set me up perfectly, because I was going to talk about identity. I learned, even in training, that I put my identity in so many things that don't last. One thing specifically was like my singing and my voice. I have like a condition that causes me to lose my voice like a lot. And in training, once I first lost my voice, I was like, I'm not good enough to sing on this team, and I was comparing myself to all the other vocalists, and I was like freaking out about how I couldn't sing. But CTI and our mission is so much more than just singing. We're servants first and musicians second. And I learned that putting my identity in my voice or in my family or in being funny or how I look, all of those things are going to go. Like my voice went, and there's so many other things that are not permanent. But the one thing that is forever is Jesus. And He's healing me every day and bringing me back to Him. And that's the only thing that I can.
What we did at all as musicians, it's all about what God does. And there was one day that we were just not having a very good performance. It was not going well. And David Shu, the leader of YSC, turned around and he was talking to like the crowd, and then he turned around and was talking to us. And I remember him saying, "Forget about yourself and be bold." And it was really convicting, because I had realized like how much that I was like focusing on how well I was doing in the performance or how well my gospel verbals were going, but realizing that like it's not about how well we play, it's not about how well we think we communicated the message. It's all about what God does through us, and He uses anything. So.
Anybody else want to take anything on something you learned about yourself?
Kind of to piggyback off of what these two said, I realized that I like control, and that is not something you can have in this kind of ministry. It's taken multiple illnesses for God to be like, psych, this isn't about you anymore. As you can tell, I'm still having trouble with my voice. But that was one thing I've learned over and over that presented to me in Hong Kong was it's not about you anymore. It's totally not about you anymore. And I love that, and I'm still learning that to this day. So.
Other questions?
What's your favorite song to perform? And did that change from training to now?
Oh.
Yes.
So the question, we got some eager answers here. The question was, what, I'm assuming in your repertoire, is your favorite song to perform, and is that different between what it was in training and what it is now?
No, actually, I found all of the songs to be more endearing as we sang them to hungry and thirsty people in the Spirit of the Lord that we came in, and I could see Him working on the outside as He was moving on the inside of me.
All the songs.
My favorite during training was definitely This Is Amazing Grace, because it came easily to the team and it was just so fun, and I still love it. But my favorite now is definitely One Way. And not just because I got to lead it, but because we had dance moves, and once we got to see the crowd like get into it, it was like, this is so fun, and like I'm so pumped to play it tonight, guys. I can't wait.
So my favorite song during training was Bot Joy, because it had an awesome guitar solo. But when we lost Josh halfway through due to health issues, that song just wasn't the same. So Josh, we miss you.
Watch Josh.
We miss you, Josh.
Yeah, he went home.
Yeah, he went home. He didn't die. I'm sorry. He did not die. So sorry.
We think he's still at the Mongkok station. I'm not sure.
But my favorite song now is also One Way, because you'll see it's really fun.
Ba Joy Yi is the song in their repertoire that's It's like we've compared it to Journey's Don't Stop Believin' and how much traction that has in our culture. That's kind of the way it is in Hong Kong. And it just relies on this signature epic guitar lick, which the team's guitarist, lead guitarist Josh, just nailed. And partway into the trip, Josh developed some concerns, health concerns, for which he needed to return home. So that's something that the team mourned and had to carry on without him. But that song I could see not being the same without Josh.
Yeah, I would agree. During training, I think is definitely, this is Amazing Grace and About Joy for me, because of the leads and all that. But it's definitely grown now that I've fully memorized it. It would be Roycey. And just how much participation comes from it and the message behind it and how the chorus just tells of Jesus' death on the cross and his love for everyone. I just love how much the message behind the song gets to be sung over everyone.
And these are songs in Cantonese, by the way, although you did two in Mandarin.
Yeah, actually my favorite is a Mandarin song. So we do this song called Heartbeat, which is by a famous Mando pop star named Jem. And it was one of my closest fun ones to mix in the beginning. And it's my favorite one to mix now. Just because, one, the message, but two, the keys line is just pretty dang sick/awesome.
Wow. Mine definitely changed because I really liked Power of the Cross when we started because that was one of my favorite songs. But my least favorite song during training became my favorite song, which was Shangje de Koi.
And then I had two favorites. One of them was I Am Alive, just because we never really got to play it. We only ever played it as a crowd drawer. And it was just a really good song. It was just guitar and then two vocalists. And then One Way, just because it's great. And seeing everybody get so reactant to it and how pumped they are for it. When you start playing it, it's an upbeat, fun song, and there's dance moves to it, and everybody just loves it. Yep.
I would say my favorite song from our rep was Power of the Cross, just because the message of the lyrics, which is in almost all of our songs, but just the way the lyrics are in that song is just so powerful, and I just love the arrangement around it. But one song that I really did not like at the beginning was Heartbeat, which I talked about. I really like country music, and that's a very not country song. So I was trying to play drums to a style of music that I had no feel for at all.
What is the style of Heartbeat?
Kind of electronic. It's the best way I can describe.
Mickey, that was a good question. You got everybody to participate on that. So that's the new standard to aspire for, apparently. What's our next question? Chris?
Did you collectively or individually have a moment of victory of things are going wrong, you feel like you can't pull yourselves out of it, and all of a sudden just bam, it came through, and it was the most amazing feeling ever?
You want to repeat the question for people?
Yeah,
sure. So I'm going to completely mess up this question. The question was there a time when either you felt like everything was going wrong or just, I guess, kind of at the end of yourself and just really needed to reach deeper within and what the experience was with that? So I'll start with that one. There was one day, probably about a weekend, we had a pretty busy schedule, and about 5 minutes before a concert, David Chu calls me, and he says that the next school, it's a very short amount of time between schools, so he asked me if we can have 10 people take 2 cabs over to that school and do an a cappella set, and leave one person behind to tear everything down and take it back to YFC. So we have a lot of people, and we all have jobs for setup and tear down. And so I'm on the phone with them, and one thing we talk about is the answer is always yes if our partner asks us to do something. And I'm sitting there on the phone going, all right, 10 people leave and 1 person stays. That's me, I'm staying. And I'm going to tear down all of the stuff on myself. And I was like, how is that going to work? And so I said, yes, we will do it. So we want to make sure we get to that school and can deliver the message that we have to that school. So I didn't really have time to go over that with anybody before the concert. So I'm just thinking about it the entire concert, and then after the concert I was like, all right, surprise plan. All of you guys are about to jump in 2 cabs and go to this school. And I'm going to stay here and put everything away. And them trusting that that's what needed to happen so that we could make sure we got to that school and delivered our message, because there wasn't going to be much time to set up our stuff after tearing down. And during that, in a full year with CTI, I was definitely exhausted at times, but that was the first time where I was completely physically exhausted. Every piece of equipment, every cable, backing it up, carrying it out, like 3rd floor, down, loading into a van, then taking it back to YFC, and then as soon as I shut the door of the storage shed with all the gear, it's like, all right, a break. And then they come down and say, oh, you're done already? You can walk over to the next school and perform with the team. So I did like another 15, 20-minute walk over to the next school. Got there before they performed and was drenched. And I probably looked like I went swimming and performed with the a cappella set. So in that moment, as I was finally carrying the equipment to the van at the school, I mean, my arms were tired, my legs were tired, every muscle in my body just like hurt. And all that was going through my mind was just like praise songs. And was just so full of joy. When there was nothing left in me, God has given me that peace and joy to be able to continue and to still celebrate and serve in any way that I could.
So we were about maybe 3 or 4 days in training, or not training, into Hong Kong, and I was just exhausted. Everybody was. I had no idea like how I was going to get more energy. I was falling asleep during debrief. That was what we do every night, and like just fighting to stay awake. And I need to take a shower that night, so I took a shower, and I was just like laying in bed, and I was just wondering like, why am I here? Like, I'm so tired right now. There's no way that my music is sounding good. And so I started praying about it, and then the next night I was laying in bed again, and I was listening to like my favorite song of all time. It's Ocean by John Butler. It's a 12-minute song with just guitar. He wrote this entire like guitar like orchestra, and it's absolutely amazing. And I was thinking to myself, like, I am so impacted by this song, and like I'm so inspired, and this song just makes me feel like $1 million every time I listen to it. And then it's like, that's what we can do for these people. Like, we can be so impactful for these people in our music and the messages that we have to share for them. And so it's kind of like both at the same time.
So I don't know if things were going like rough necessarily, but we had, I don't remember how many days in this was, but we hadn't really seen like anyone like come to Christ, or like we didn't really see any results of what our performance, because a lot of times we'd perform, have to rush off, we wouldn't really get to talk to people. But we performed at, I think it was a secondary school, and after our performance, one of the YFC volunteers did like I think presented the gospel again and like did kind of an altar call, and there was like 12 kids that raised their hand and like that accepted Christ, and like I think that was really cool for all of us to see, because we hadn't really seen like anyone respond, and so like I think that was really refreshing, like just to see that. And I know even though like when we don't see response, we still know that God is working, but it was cool to actually see that.
So some of you know this, but at training I had a really bad migraine issue, which was totally new, and that was resolved before we left for Hong Kong. But about a weekend, Chris and I accidentally came into contact with each other getting off the bus, and my migraine was like, hey, what's up? And so there was this entire day where I was just laid out in bed, unable to think, unable to do anything, and I was just like, God, why? Why now? Like, it was going so well. And then Dr. Louise David Chu's wife took really good care of me, and these guys were really forgiving of me not being able to function for a day. And I was back at it the day after. And so that was really just a good like kick of God saying, you know what, it's not about you again. But that was definitely a moment for me where I was like, this is a low. Don't know what to do with myself.
So I also like control, and we were at a camp right by the Hong Kong-China border. It was super fun. But as we were setting up, equipment talk for a second, we have this thing called a transformer that takes power over there, which is in 240 volts, into 110, 120, which is what we use here in the United States. And anytime we plugged it into the wall with an adapter and turned it on, the light inside started flickering, and it wasn't okay. So we changed things around, and it was okay, it was functional. So then we plugged this thing called a power conditioner over in the back, and it kind of just makes sure everything conditions. So when we only have to take over one outlet instead of 12 to set up a whole sound system, which is super nice. But it also tells us if things are safe. And so at one point, there's like all these little different lights, and one of the green lights just started flickering red. And as in anything, red is bad. So we turned it off, and we couldn't turn it back on. And that was one of my goals this year, is to learn how to fix problems like this. And I could not figure it out for the life of me, and I was just so frustrated. There's a lot of emotional things that I was going through that day, processing grief, processing a lot of things. And then this wasn't working well, and I was still really tired, and nothing was working. I'm just sitting there, I was like, why can't this work? Why can't I see the improvement or the growth that has happened throughout this whole year? And I just sat there. I was like, well, it doesn't matter if I see it or not. It doesn't matter if it's there. All that matters is doing the work of the gospel. And we just have to find a different way how to make this work. So we went unconventional and did things that made things work, and we got the sound out that we needed to get out to spread the gospel. And so it eventually worked, and it got me to push past.
Yeah, I would agree. Kira and I are a power team, so it was like, no, Furman's not working, and he's like, our power provider, so that was sad. But then, God worked it out for good, and we gave them a set, and the pastor that night, because it was a camp setting, so it was all these young kids, and he was just cracking jokes, and I wish I could have understood all that he said, because the kids were just cracking up and loving, his sermon, and really brought his lesson to completion, full circle. The kids were totally grasping it, and that again was another time of saying, Lord, we're just a small part of what you're doing here. So it was cool to be a part of that.
Something Melissa just said made me remember something. We had just a long day one day, and we were coming back to this restaurant called the Dragon Restaurant, and we all sit at the table and we eat and mind one another. But I went to the bathroom, and I was coming back from the bathroom, and I heard the Holy Spirit saying, I am a great big old God, and you are a little bitty old person. And I came back to the table, and David Chu, we were getting ready to leave, and David Chu handed every one of us a $500 Hong Kong bill, and it just brightened, it just made it was not, but it just put a glow in my heart that I had just heard that from the Holy Spirit, and then David Chu gave us a $500 Hong Kong bill, each one of us a piece, and we got to go to the street market, this thing called Temple Street, and buy souvenirs and stuff.
I know there's some questions up here we haven't been able to get to. Yeah, right there.
I think we can all sit and think of your team, and of the team that's heading out, that you yourself don't hold a lot of worldly possessions. Very important that you have bigger pictures and bigger goals in your life than what a thing might mean to other people in America. But what is something that maybe became less important now than your trip to Hong Kong, where you got to see not only a different world, but really soak into your mission?
We talked a little bit about this in our oral session this morning, that when God takes you out of your home environment and He does something in you, some things that used to mean the world to you begin to become less important, and some things that didn't used to be important to you at all begin to rise in importance. Does anybody want to share any of those things for them in response to this question?
I think for me, I just realized how much I took for granted. I live in the country back home in a town of 300 people, and we have 30 some acres. gravel roads and all that kind of stuff. And so like being in Hong Kong, where I was like, everything is so congested, like buildings are like next to each other and there's no space. I was like, oh my gosh, just get me out of here. Like I need fresh air. I need to see the stars. But I think, yeah, with that, like just realizing how much, I mean, even toilet paper, like we take that for granted, you guys. And like just like simple things like that, and realizing like with me for social media, like I was like, why do I waste my time on like social media? Not having your phone for 3 weeks, you guys, is gonna be the greatest thing of your life. It's gonna be so good. And so like deleting Snapchat, deleting stuff like that, it's like such a freeing feeling that like none of that is very important. Like why am I on my phone when I could be telling people about Jesus?
Will you ask your question one more time?
What's something after your experience in Hong Kong that maybe was very important before and maybe is less important, or something that you didn't value before and now you're getting ready to return home to your regular life that is maybe more important now?
So, for those of you that don't know me, I wear cowboy boots pretty much every day, all year on full time. I have tennis shoes that I play drums in, and I wear them so rarely that I kept them in my hardware case as part of my drum hardware, but I only use them when I play drums. So, like, as part of my setting up my drums was changing my shoes, because I'm much more comfortable in my cowboy boots. And before going to Hong Kong, with having, letters for the team members and other things, it's like, I'm not going to have a whole lot of space for extra shoes. Can I do this without taking my boots? So I did. And I didn't bring my boots. I went through. I'm wearing them today. Yeah. So yeah, just recognizing that that is something that's very comfortable for me, but I don't need it to be able to be comfortable, to be able to do what's asked of me. Just being okay before I left with not bringing them, and then not stressing about it while I was there. Definitely just trusting God for my comfort and not things that of this world that I lean on.
So it was just like a little thing, because when we get there, there's just big tall buildings everywhere, and like you can't really see the sky. And I was like, where are the clouds? And then like I just looked, and I was like, oh, there they are. So one thing that I'm going to value a lot more is like being able to like look that way and see clouds. Yeah.
I think one of the things I valued a lot before I came here was my independence, because I just moved out last year. I live alone, I go to college, and I was super excited to have that alone time. Then I came here and I'm with people every second of the day, and I didn't have that relationship with my parents that I, took for granted. Don't start crying, Mom. That I took for granted all the time for the year I was at college. And so something I'm going to value a lot more when I get home is being able to just talk to them like on a daily basis, which is something that you'll miss it. Don't even know. But yeah, definitely unity and team is something that is way up on my priority list now.
Something that I will not fear anymore after this trip is things. Things like cameras and computers, and I just felt like the presence of the Lord, just like every time we were sweating and stuff, he'd be like, oh, we staying. And I was like, no, it's mercy. It's like I just felt like he was just watching us in tons of mercy. And he kept telling me that I am the living one, and the one who lives and has a watchful eye and all these things. Jesus has the keys to death and Hades in his hand. So.
So, before I start home, don't freak out. Any expectations you have of my future may still happen. Don't worry. But something that I found less value in is romantic love and relationships that way. Yep, I'm going to go there. So, since I was like little girl, like I was that girl that would plan my wedding, and I wanted to get married, and I wanted to have like 3 to 9 kids, depending on what phase of life I was in. Usually adopted. For like the last decade, all of them adopted. But that was like a huge value for me, was getting married and having family and all that jazz. But that like has decreased throughout this trip. And what's increased in turn is doing anything for the sake of the gospel. Whether that means going overseas long term, staying here in the US long term, whether that means volunteering at a soup kitchen or hanging out with the youth or sitting in a nursery hanging out with babies who can't say a single word to you, even though they're cute and adorable. I like to have conversations as well. So I think that's the difference of what has changed over these last few weeks.
Great question. Do we have some more? Yeah, right here.
What would you, I don't know how to kind of phrase it, look at American Christianity versus Hong Kong Christianity? You know, how did you relate to them in this?
So are you asking specifically about people who are already believers in Hong Kong?
Yeah, I mean, the way they look at Christ versus the way we look.
Can you offer any insight on kind of the difference between the way Christians in Hong Kong look at Christ versus the way we do? Is the question.
Great question, Dad. So the one thing that came to mind immediately was the Filipino churches that we went to. Like, oh my word, church like in the U.S. is nothing compared to Filipino churches. If we could just like be like even half as like spirit-filled and enthusiastic for Jesus and the gospel and what he's done for us as those Filipino women who have like nothing and like backstories like you wouldn't believe, like you just feel the Holy Spirit like in a totally different way when you're like worshiping with these women and like they're just so just like hype on Jesus. And then you like, I'm like thinking about my church back home and I'm like, wow, we just sing 3 songs and sit down. Like these ladies are like dancing and tambourines and like the whole nine. Like they're just so much on fire for Jesus. And I'm like, what would this country look like if we were even half that on fire for Jesus sometimes?
I'm a member of an evangelical church in Dallas, and so going to the Filipino church was very fulfilling for me. My eyes and my ears are always open, but when I heard the first prayer of one of the ministers at the Filipino church, and it was a gentleman, and my eyes just started overflowing because it was such a full prayer, and it was in their language, Tagalog, and it was just a full good pleasure prayer, and I heard it, and my heart just was overfilled with joy, and who knows what else the Lord was doing through my tears. So.
Great. Next question.
What did you guys learn in these last 6 weeks that you can take home to your communities?
What did you learn over the last 6 weeks that you want to take home to your communities?
What I learned in the last 6 weeks that I could take home is just that the Christian church in Hong Kong is just as hungry and thirsty as we are here for more of His Spirit and more of His righteousness in us. And just to keep pressing forward and moving forward and pressing onward.
One thing that I learned is I got like a new definition for what ministry is, because there was a lot of times that the YFC would ask us to do something that I was like, how does this relate or share the gospel at all? Like when we're tossing those trinkets in the air and everyone's going crazy, I'm like, where is Jesus in this? And just all the little things that we were asked to do and being tired and stuff. I've learned that ministry and sharing the gospel can be in loving my teammates and giving a verbal on stage and one-on-one conversations. It can be in serving the need of the partner without having any reason or explanation. But that if we choose to ask God for the strength to do so, every second of every day can be ministry and can be sharing the gospel.
So one thing that I really took away from this is how to share the gospel. I am not a person that likes to speak in front of people. Like, this is intimidating to me. But one thing that I learned in Hong Kong is how to just trust that God is going to speak through you. And I did a lot of praying before my verbals, like a lot, to make sure that God was going to speak through me rather than me trying to speak for God. And that's just something that I hope that I keep and use at home.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it made me more on fire to be intentional in sharing in my own context when it comes to sharing the gospel with our communities. And we have a small community at my church that does so, but it's so easy for me to be more comfortable to go to worship practice that's on the same night than to go gospel sharing with that group. And so just constantly trying to break through my own comfort zone of saying, God, you've provided me this experience so that I would learn that the lost will be found and we need to go in your name. So, and also, for me also, it's been to be intentional in my job as a teacher of making sure that my faith is known and that the love for the Lord is seen every day for my students.
So I'm going to break your question and give you two things. Sorry about that, B-Money. But anyway. But one, nothing is more important than propelling the gospel forward. And two, that it does not matter about my own ability to God's faithfulness.
So the major thing that I want to take home and that I want to pass on to you guys is something that the training staff repeatedly told us, and it's that you are there to share the gospel and be servants. And if you get to play music, that's a bonus. And that goes with anything, any line of work, anywhere, is that you are here to share the gospel and to be a servant. And anything else you do is a bonus.
One thing that I had to constantly remind myself in Hong Kong was that it's not about how well we perform or whatever. It's about just being faithful to do what God has called us to. So I think that's something that I want to continue to just be faithful to what God has called me to do. Another thing is just having to give verbals and share the gospel. Being forced to do that just gives you a greater understanding of the gospel, and it helps you clearly share it just through practice. And I think just having that practice, I want to be more intentional, just through conversations with friends or whatever, to just through my own life stories or experiences to point others to Christ through that.
Yeah, I'd echo what Iowa said. It's just everything relates to the gospel, and everything can turn into the gospel. I did a verbal about air conditioning and tied it back to the gospel. Guys, literally everything applies to the gospel, and being able to just slip that into a conversation about just normal everyday stuff, and just making sure that people know about the gospel, not just being oh, I have to say it only in church or whatever. Everyday conversations.
So I probably learned a couple of things. One is just God will give you strength, for whatever you need to do, and whatever tight situations or circumstances that you're in, and if you just let go, then He will completely take care of it 100%, and you don't have to worry about a single thing. And it may look bad, but you're gonna get out of that situation. Another thing is how valuable life is. Going through weeks without your phone and just seeing human interaction and all that stuff. And it's just it's a huge world if you just look up. Yeah.
So there were many times while we were there that people on the team would ask me questions about our day or what was going to happen. And my most likely response was, I don't know. Because I didn't know. And just recognizing that I got to a place where I was really okay with that. If I know the answer, I'm going to tell them. And I probably actually already told them. But if I don't know the answer, I'm saying, I don't know. But what I do know is who I belong to, who we belong to, where our identity is, and that trusting in God that He was going to provide for us, and trusting in what the YFC staff had planned for us, and being able to say, I don't know what we're going to be doing an hour from now, but we're going to be ready, and if we're asked to do something, we're going to do it the best attitude we can, and to serve, and to try and show each other and the other people around us love as we serve together.
Awesome. Questions?
What did you learn about teamwork? Or what did you learn from the process of working with a team of strangers? And the importance of unity, how to support one another in that when you really didn't know each other that well 5 weeks, 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, so these guys didn't know each other before they came together as a team. So what did you learn out of that reality of being thrown together with a bunch of strangers and having to learn how to work together as a team?
I guess I'll start. One thing about working as a team is it's not going to happen unless you put effort into it, unless you choose to trust each other, you choose to invest in each other, and to constantly know that we're going to be stronger if we do this together. And it's a choice everyone has to make, and I think we saw that a lot in this trip. There were so many times where we did choose to work together as a team and just grew stronger every day in that. By choosing to trust each other, to invest in each other, and to know that our purpose is the same and we are much stronger together than by ourselves.
So it taught me that when you are working with a big group and there's a lot to be done, if everybody has one thing to do and you all do it, then it goes super smooth. And if you get done and you don't know what to do, then just ask hey, is there anything I can help you with? And most of the time there is, but sometimes there's not. And another thing that I learned is if you see people that it's only a 2-person job, don't get in the way because you're just going to get in the way. Things are not going to go as smoothly if you're trying to help and help isn't necessary. And don't take that wrong at all. It's just so.
I think a huge thing is knowing your team. We left for Hong Kong and we're all right, we know these people. You guys know. We know more about each other than probably any of us wanted to, but it's the more we got to know each other and trust each other and know where each other's hearts were at and where we were coming from, it's just that much easier to work together and put effort in to want to help and want to be around these people. And it's not any of us came in with selfish attitudes at all. I'm not saying that, but the more you get to know your team, the more you're okay, now we can work together as a unit because we know kind of what we are going for.
Yeah, just as advice, look to the interests of others, because there will be times when you're all seated around a banquet table, and if you don't come up with something to talk about that might interest your neighbor, then you guys are all going to be silent. So it, or not, but but that was something that really drew me to CTI, was knowing that I'd live in close community with people for such a short time, or for such a long time. And I was super stoked about it, and I see these people, I knew that we were coming in as strangers, but also I knew that we were all designed to come together through the Lord, and now I see us as family, and I'm so thankful for that, of all the ways that we did grow to get to know each other better, and I'll definitely miss it a lot, but yeah, it's been.
So I learned that it is definitely not about any one of us. There's no I in team. So one day we were at Star Ferry. It was the first day we were there, and we were getting ready to set up, and I was looking around for my bass, and it wasn't there. So I had to sit in the back next to David and be the shaker. And it was it was just one of the worst feelings. But I'm sorry, David. Not being next to you, but not having my bass was not fun. But I realized that our team doesn't necessarily need a bass to function as it needs to. Like, I can still be a shaker, and it's perfectly fine for spreading the gospel, and that's what we need. We need to be flexible, and just because I don't have my bass doesn't mean that I can't work with the team.
For me, there's a scripture that stayed on my heart the whole time. Strive for unity and love, and the God of peace will abide there. And striving for unity and love, it became difficult for me as I could see just several things. But the good outweighed the bad, and all the time. And for me, even Asian people understand you. And who is he that don't understand you? Who is he that is in your mind and messing with you if it's not the enemy and will not understand you and who you serve and who image you bear and bring and whose glory is shining and whose light is before you. But striving for unity and love, the God of peace will be there. That is the understanding of what I see, and who is he that does not understand? Who is he that wrestles with our heart and our mind?
So this wasn't really part of the question, but one thing that Melissa said was like just to take interest in like what your teammates do and like talk about them, and like that's really important because we were sitting around a dinner table and it was kind of awkward and everybody was like being quiet, and I was sitting next to Melissa, and I'm from Colorado and I mountain bike a lot, and she literally like sat there for an hour and just like listened to me talk about mountain biker jargon. So that was like one of the things that I really appreciated.
So one of the things I want you guys to take away from this question is, at training, Roxy we went through this thing where she asks, how can I better serve you? We had this day where we found out the best ways to serve each other, whether we were like a touchy-feely person or whether we were a comment person. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? Love languages, thank you. That was what I was looking for. Do not take that for granted. Like, I kind of went through that and I was like, yeah, great, I know what love languages are. Kachi doesn't like to be touched, yay. But when we got over there, it was so important. Like, knowing when to write a letter for someone and what to say, knowing if you need to hug that person, you can just tell if that's the right thing to do. So definitely learn what you guys' love languages are and put them to use while you're over there, because it will be very important.
We're running tight on time, so I want to give at least one other opportunity for questions from out here if there are others that haven't been answered or asked. Okay, right here.
Kind of a fun question. You have a new nickname you got.
Yes.
I'm sensing a setup here, but the question is, did you get any new nicknames? Oh, is this what I think it is? Because I was going to ask. I never got my answer to this question today. So.
Chris, say it.
I think so.
Say it. No, have Chris say it.
You got this.
All right. So I have a pretty long nickname. It continues to grow every couple of days. So Chris will tell me if I mess up. But it's Super Trooper Grandpa Bearded Baby Daddy Tenacious D-Dave Dankness.
Is that what we were looking for out of the question? Are there other nicknames that need to be circulated?
So a nickname that David gave me, my name is Chris Dark, so see in the dark.
Paul the Silk.
That's not his nickname, that's like his actual name.
So like, Chris said that back home he was called C Rizzle, and like I'm the only one that called him that. Everyone else is like Chris or like whatever. But it like eventually got started to like C Riz, and then he started calling me K Slice. But he's the only one that I think gave me a nickname.
So I quickly became Iowa because I'm from Iowa and I'm proud of it. And so, yeah.
Caitlin, can we sing the song?
No.
Save the songs for the cops.
I got 2 new nicknames while I was there. NAS, the group we were with, started calling me Jinx from League of Legends because I have blue hair. And Melissa and I have a code, and mine is blue, and I'll let you tell her what hers is.
I'm red.
Very difficult.
And also MRAS. I think I gave it to myself, but I wanted to be a part of the K Slice and C Riz crew. So I'm MRAS or MRAZZLE.
Actually, Roxy, I like to call you Roxinator, so that is a nickname. I go by a lot of names. Chris started calling me B-Funk, which I'm very proud of, but my favorite one was NAS. They were asking me what my name was, and so I said Toast, and they started calling me Toast. I kid you not. They called me Toast all the time. I'm so happy.
I didn't get a new nickname, but I remembered one of Brett's that I think he forgot about. We made a friend with a girl named Esther, and one of the nights that we ate supper with her, she thought that David was Brett's dad. Which leads to, I don't know what part of his name, maybe the baby daddy part, I'm not sure. But
I just call him Dad now.
yeah, Brett was called Son a lot.
Would you hand the mic to Corey, please? And I told you guys this was coming, but this is going to be your last opportunity to pass off a single, concise word of encouragement to the Singapore team. So, Singapore team, I'd like you to stand at this point. One thing that happens today is by the end of the night, these guys will cease to be CTI and you guys will become CTI. So, Hong Kong team, would you also stand? Maybe stand up on the top of the stage. And we're going to pass the mic from that end down to this end, and you're going to have your opportunity to say, this is the one thing I want you to take away from this. This is the one thing I want you to remember. So, Corey, why don't you start us off?
One thing I would like for you all to remember is to go and get stored up. Go get filled. Because when you come back and you're in U.S. soil, you're charged again. And you're charged to go where he leads you. And you're charged to go and speak good things for him. And whatever it is that he's going to fill you with in Singapore.
My advice, Caitlin and I kind of shared this verse as kind of like our base verse while we were gone, but 2 Corinthians 12:9, His grace is sufficient for you in your weakness. And I guarantee there's going to be moments where you feel like you can't go another minute, another second, but He's going to give you the strength. So just rely on Him.
I just want to say, make sure you guys get out of your comfort zones. I was told to be bold, so I'm going to tell you guys, be bold with sharing.
Yeah, serve God first and foremost and trust Him.
God will get you through this, no matter how dark it can seem. But you need to trust Him with every step, with every breath, with every moment.
I'm just going to repeat mine. You are there to be a servant and to share the gospel. And if you're going to play music, that's a bonus.
I would just say, like, forget about your own fears, your own worries, and be bold for the sake of the gospel.
God is good, and He is sovereign through anything you guys are going to go through, and you just have to trust that, because ultimately that's the only thing you're going to be able to fall back on some days.
Seems like all the important stuff has already been said. So, take showers in Singapore.
I would say that when you don't know what you're doing or why you're doing it, just always remember who you belong to and what He's done for you.
Let's thank these teamers. I'm going to pray to close this time off, and then we're going to adjourn until 7 p.m. Everybody is invited to come back and join us at 7 for the final concert. Musical shout-out of Team Hong Kong. In between then and now, we have some stuff we're going to take care of as a community, and we're going to eat here, but there are many fine restaurants in Wilmer that our local guests can avail themselves of. So yeah, I'm going to do that, and then immediately following that, training staff and team members from both rounds, let's meet out here in the gathering area outside these doors, and Casey will have some instructions for us about we're going to take a big group picture. So God, thank you for these team members. Thank you for the experience that you have brought them through, and thank you for the ways that you have been glorified in and through them as you've taken them halfway around the world and back, sharing your name. Thank you for being who you are, and thank you for the gospel and what you have done for us. And may your glory continue to radiate through what they have to share this evening and even as they depart and go home. And we pray these things in your name. Amen. Amen.
Thank you.